the chairs of Finance and the Judiciary Chair for the great degree of latitude that you have. Even though I am not a member of either the Finance Committee or the Judiciary Committee, I am definitely thankful for the opportunity that you've afforded me to participate in the hearings and to ask a multitude of questions. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Aloha Kako. Having conferred with Finance Chair Sylvia Luke, we have agreed to recommend moving SB1 forward with 3 significant amendments. First, we will adopt religious exemption language based on Connecticut law. Section 572F will now read, and I quote, "Notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, no religious organization or nonprofit institution or organization operated, supervised, or controlled by a religious organization shall be required to provide goods and services or its facilities and grounds for the solemnization or celebration of a marriage that is in violation of its religious beliefs and faith. These entities shall be immune from legal and administrative action for their decision to not provide goods or services or their facilities and grounds for the solemnization or celebration of a marriage pursuant to this section." Note, these provisions will also apply to civil unions, which are currently governed by a different standard. Second, we will remove Section 572C having to do with parental rights. This provision has been the topic of many testifiers over the last 5 days of hearings, and on further scrutiny, we believe it is not necessary to the functioning of the bill, and so therefore we're removing it. Third, we'll change the effective date to December 2, 2013. And finally, there are some technical and conforming amendments. Okay, I'm reluctant to say this, but members, questions, comments? Representative McDermott.
Mr. Chair, I would appreciate, first, by the way, I appreciate your hard work and Representative Luke's hard work as well. Why don't we give them both a hand, ladies and gentlemen? That said, sir, I appreciate your hard work and your draft, but I would like to propose an amendment deleting the contents of this bill and inserting there the contents of HB 5, which deals with marriage, and at the appropriate time, citing House Rule 11.3, Section 3, I would like to ensure that that matter is voted on with a roll call vote. Thank you.
Second amendment.
The recommendation of the chairs is what we're voting on, and that's what's on the table at the moment. Anything else?
Chair, I made a motion to amend your recommendation, and it was seconded. That's the matter before you. And in accordance with House Rules 11.3, Section 3,
I'm sorry,
it should be...
It's not the way it works in the committee. There's a recommendation on the table that we're going to vote on.
The House rules are silent on that with regard to the committee in particular. I have them in front of me if you'd like to read them. We should have a vote on this matter. Are we afraid to let the public see how we're going to vote on a constitutional amendment? I'm not afraid. I'll vote for it. Anyone else want to vote for one?
Chair, point of information.
The recommendation is on the table, and that's what we vote on in committee. That's always the way it works. We've checked into this. This is the way it works.
Chair, point of information.
Representative Tsuji was next.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My vote will reflect, really, I must say sincerely, with a very heavy heart. We've gone over 50 hours of testimony. We've gone through a whole number of, at least myself personally, from constituents, voicemails, emails, postcards. We've heard a number of reasons why this bill should be passed on, why we should not consider and kill the bill. And Mr. Chair, with all of that, I'd like to thank the constituents for their participation in this and your leadership, along with the leadership of the Finance Committee Chair. But I will have to say that I will vote no on this particular bill with a heavy heart, as I said, that is before us right now.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'll look to the finance end for a moment. Anyone down here? Representative Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your leadership on this particular bill. We needed to have this discussion. We needed to have this level of operationalized focus on this bill because it's going to be potentially such a huge impact on our communities. And I'm not speaking specifically to whether we should pass the bill or not, but I do think that there was wisdom in allowing all the testifiers to speak and to spoke specifically on this issue. Now, there were some other issues that were brought up that were in fact illuminated on things that we should in fact be addressing. So maybe we can seriously consider taking up some of those measures as well. Respectfully, I still have some concerns with the measure as it is currently drafted. I'm happy to see that the parentage presumptions was taken out, as revisions to statutes can potentially cause change in procedure and oftentimes does. 521E, I think it is, with regards to religious exemptions, there are still issues, I think, that Hawaii is very unique in how our church relates to our communities. And I appreciate the stronger language that was incorporated into this measure, but I still feel that I would have humbly liked some more time to take a look at to see if it's strong enough. Parental rights, also with respect to the Department of Education, parental consents and notifications. I understand that this cannot be incorporated into the bill as the title is regarding marriage, but I humbly would recommend that maybe that can be incorporated into the committee report. And that, Mr. Chairman, is all the easy stuff. Now, cutting away all the decoration, this bill is about redefining marriage. And although I will most certainly concede that we need to afford all rights to all peoples within reason, redefining the definition of marriage is in fact not a easy thing to do for all of us, respectfully. I'd like to also thank you, because it was in the 51st hour that there was some significant testimony, potentially, because there was some scientific evidence that was introduced from a microbiological standpoint with regards to anneals and phenotypic expressions. So we can potentially concede the point that, in fact, some individuals are born a certain way. And I think we all can most certainly respect that. So then it comes down to an issue of morality and how we view morality, both individually and collectively. And furthermore, if that morality changes over time, or should it change? And that is really the question before us. I think that collectively we define morality in certain ways, and we can agree that certain things are in fact immoral, and other things that we have a disagreement on. And the majority of my community, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairman, respectfully, does not agree that homosexuality is moral. So based upon that, we need to find ways that I think we can protect the minority while conceding to the majority. There's great division on this issue, obviously, and I think there needs to be a proper balance in which to address it. Respectfully, I do not think it's properly addressed in this bill as it is currently proposed. Maybe the direction would be to seek some federal action, be it to request an executive order from the president, be it other measures that would have required additional efforts on our part, but in all, at least I think there could be a consensus from a majority of both sides. So with that, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chair, I respectfully would think that this bill is actually not in proper balance, so I will be voting not in favor to pass this measure.
Okay, thank you. Members, anyone else? Oh, Representative Jordan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, in our caucus, I provided yourself as well as all the committee members on our two committees a proposed draft when we were discussing your proposed draft. hopefully all our members have seen that proposed draft. I would like to take my proposed draft for consideration. My proposed draft will point out the faulty flaws in SB1 as well as SB1 HD1 provided by you. My proposed draft hopes to facilitate further discussion for a reasonable compromise that would protect all interests involved. Mr. Chair, as I stated in our caucus, and I don't really want to discuss that out publicly, I myself have sat through 52, 6, 7 hours. We have to review 15,000 pieces of testimony, which is 3 reams of paper, as well as blessed by over 5,000 individuals speaking before us, Mr. Chair. And hopefully you will take some of my consideration into my proposed draft. I would hope your consideration would be favorable. Other than that, Mr. Chair, I would ask for your consideration for the discussion of my proposed HD1.
At the moment, as I described to Representative McDermott, the proposal that's on the table that we'll be voting on is the one I just described. Anyone else? Representative Lee. Followed by Representative Brower.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for your work and the staff and everybody. And I appreciate our comments from our colleagues. And I think after 57 hours of testimony, we've heard more than anything, I think, that people on both sides of this issue want their religious freedom and they want their equal rights. And I think this bill, with these amendments, provides both. And ultimately, it takes a huge leap forward towards ending discrimination against many families here in Hawaii. And I think it's the right thing to do. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Brower.
Thank you, Chair. For me, this bill has been more of a reaction to today's modern society than a vehicle to intentionally lead us somewhere, and it attempts to bring balance and guidance to changing times. And I kind of was saying to myself, with a little bit of a chuckle, should this bill eventually become law, will it make Hawaii's gay community less gay? Because with acceptance comes a certain responsibility. And the following day, after this bill passes, should it make it through the legislature, that's the day I feel it's our duty to work to begin to fix any possible unintended consequences that could result from the measure. Figuratively speaking, we saw through the 60 hours of testimony that the bill genetically has all the same DNA as the heterosexual marriage law we have in Hawaii today. The biggest point of contention in testimony was the 8-letter word marriage. And I say to myself, would it be logical to call it something else other than marriage? In my life, whenever I had fear, it was always because I had a lack of faith in God. And this bill does not redefine God or the Bible's idea of marriage. It readjusts the state of Hawaii's definition of marriage. Marriage is a concept that societies have redefined for millennia. And I would just ask the people who are listening today, and myself included, if we believe in God, isn't our faith strong enough to withstand an adjustment to the definition of marriage? Thank you.
Chair.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for 5 days of intense listening, questioning, and I want to thank the audience for the teaching that you've done for us. I heard so loud and clear, whether it was by some or all, but it was a repetitive theme that you were very concerned about religious freedom. Number 2, you were very concerned about your families and your keikis, and you were very concerned about individual rights, small businesses, conscience exemptions. Those are 3 issues that are not addressed. Repeat, not addressed in this bill in 1 iota. In fact, solemnization is only for religious purposes. If you're doing a baptism or a burial, none of this stuff applies for the churches. If you're doing a basketball and other things that are ancillary to your church, they're not covered by this. So we've put up a shield. It's a plastic shield, which was SB1. Now we've got maybe a tin shield. So what was otherwise to be a securing of the religious freedoms is a very weak and wobbly one. And I say, after having given you the credit for being open and listening, that I'm very disappointed that you've changed the rules of amendments. As you've seen, I've stood up and I've given 3 amendments. One was for the keikis, that parents could opt out their kids. I think that would make this very strong and very agreeable to the community, which is warring against each other, because one, through the mama bears and papa bears that were speaking, they're old enough to go through this, but they don't want their keikis oriented into a new lifestyle or an alternative lifestyle. That amendment was not able to be put forward. My colleagues have it. They know it's needed to be addressed. Secondly, the individual acts of conscience, the small business people, those of you who are individual believers. And for those of you who don't believe, you know, it's not imaginary that God exists. Everybody from the beginning of our forefathers always relied on divine providence. For those of you who don't believe, that's okay. But for those who do believe, respect them. Because you've stirred, particularly in the Hawaiian community, an ethos, a deep felt sense of deprivation that some Hawaiians told me that since 1893 and the overthrow, they've never felt since then. So the second amendment I was going to put in, for those individual rights of conscience, you will be exempt from this bill. That has not been able to be heard because of the overruling of the chairs, which I think is probably illegal, but I'm not going to go there. The third one that I gave is so the Civil Rights Commission is not going to poke a hole into this tin shield that we've put up. It's exempting the churches in the definition of public accommodations. That is the gold standard to protect you pastors. That is the gold standard to protect you churches. That is another amendment that our illustrious leaders would not listen to. So know that there are ways of making this better, and what we've got now is kind of a jalopy of sorts. It's on the road, it's pushing, and you can see that we were here for 5 days, and it was a little bit more than 2 hours by which we're forced here to make a decision, limiting our counsel with others, limiting our counsel with our legal counsel to come here to be able to give you an instant shake and bake decision after sitting here 5 days listening to you, and wait till you see the vote. I'm sure you're going to look for a correlation between the 80 to 90% that was against this bill and the 80 to 90% of these committees that may be for the bill. But we will leave that for history. This is a historic moment, but I want to thank the people of Hawaii for their input. We got a lot of work to do given the assignments you've just given us. Having said that, Chair, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tokioka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ng, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I too would like to thank both chairs for the opportunity, because at one point, the people were going to get shut out from showing up and testifying after the rule was already made. So I appreciate your stance in listening to the people that came to testify and the members. You know, after doing this job at the state and county level for 17 years, I was really invigorated on what we do and the responsibility that we have this past week. You saw so many people come from all over the place. Unfortunately, the neighbor islands didn't come as much as they wanted to because it's not cheap to show up over here. You know, I thought when you asked me, Chair Rhodes, how many people were coming from Kauai, I thought at least 50 people would come, but only 3 people came. And that's a lot of that is due to the cost and the time, and people didn't know that they were going to be able to testify or not. You know, I think the issue that we're dealing with right now, I can say this. When we dealt with civil unions, I voted no. But when the issue for reciprocal benefits came up, I voted yes. In fact, every single member on both sides of the Senate and the House voted for reciprocal benefits. So we took care of our responsibility at the state level. You know, this issue is a federal level, and hopefully, you know, they will have the courage to do what is right, you know, because that is in their ball court right now, Mr. Chair. So, you know, I feel terrible for the people that have come here, and we've had over 5,000 pieces of testimony, and when I'm looking at our laptop, and the staff in the clerk's office did such a tremendous job, we all want to thank you for what you did, because when you pulled up the testimony, it had in red opposition, in green in support, and connected to that was the testimony. So, you know, it was really, really easy for us to follow the testimony that people were giving us, and we thank you for that, staff. A lot of people said, you know, why aren't you looking at us? Because we're looking at the testimony, and if we stared this way the whole time, you know, many of us would have stiff necks. So for the people that were offended that we weren't always looking at you, I apologize from myself sincerely, and I'm sure everybody does feel the same way. But at the end of the day, it's an important decision that we have to make, Mr. Chair. And for me, I can sleep good tonight knowing that I tried my best to support the position of not myself, because it's not my decision. I asked my community. When civil unions came up in 2007, I sent a survey to everyone that I possibly could in my district, whether it was an email or a survey card. And I know some people say, well, you know, that's not equal rights. I think I really understand what that is, but maybe you do not agree with me. But the most important job I feel as a legislator is to find out what our people want us to do. And I think sometimes people misunderstand that. Because if it was another issue, if it was PLDC, there are people in here screaming and shouting at us. Why don't you listen to the people? Well, we repealed PLDC. We listened. But in this case, it's not the same. I just, you know, I have to go back to my community, and I have to tell them that, you know, I did as much as I could, and I hope they respect that. And I hope the people that don't agree with me respect my position as well. So, Mr. Chair, for those reasons, and I wish part of this committee testimony or speeches in the end could include words into the journal, because as a freshman, for, you know, the rep from Kahului, to be so articulate in his comments, and he didn't even ask one question, I don't think, throughout the whole testimony. So, you know, I know that he was very diligent in doing his job, and, you know, if I could, I would add his words into the journal, Mr. Chair. But thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and thank you, everyone, whether you are in agreement or not. Thank you for being here, because this was the big, I've said this in caucus, this is the biggest thing that the state of Hawaii at the legislative level has ever dealt with, and I'm proud that people got involved in the process. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am voting no.
Thank you. Representative Ng.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this, for the opportunity to speak, and also for holding these 5-day-long hearings. I think this is the most time in the history of Hawaii that we spent deliberating a single bill. And secondly, I really admire all you guys who came out to speak your hearts, sometimes having to wait in the halls for days. I feel like you're here for the right reasons, standing up for your convictions and deeply rooted beliefs. So thank you. What an amazing time to be a freshman, and what an incredible demonstration of democracy. You'll probably be surprised to know that I come from a very conservative Christian background and still identify as such. Chair, I apologize that my next few comments will be a bit theological, but I believe it is extremely pertinent to this discussion given the makeup of the audience. I ask that my fellow Christians listen to what I'm about to say with an open mind and open heart. I grew up learning that homosexuality was wrong. As a child, I viewed them as sinners, people choosing to lead an ungodly lifestyle. But throughout high school and as a young adult, I made friends in the LGBT community. I studied psychology and genetics in college, and learned that while the Bible may say it is immoral, being gay is not a choice. It is a matter of who someone is. Even in ex-gay and gender-fluid people, sexuality and gender may change throughout their lifetime, but not by choice. Just as the sky changes from dark to light, and our height changes throughout adolescence. Some may say, okay, being gay is not a choice, but the homosexual behavior can still be controlled. You can choose to behave in a homosexual manner. So Christians, I ask you, what do we expect our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters to do? Be alone their entire lives? Have secretive lifestyles, relationships, and not be in the type of committed monogamous relationships that this bill pertains to? How is that conducive to a moral and fair society? They are the way they are. Shouldn't we allow them to love who they love? The concept of traditional marriage as defined by both the church and state, has evolved over time. From biblical supported polygamy to property and political transactions to the concept of encouraging procreation and familial protection that many of you are fighting to protect today. Traditional marriage is a fluid concept. But when we do question tradition, we need to be able to ask why. Why does this tradition exist? What is the point of this rule? And where does this belief come from? Clearly, marriage is no longer about procreation, or else it would be reflected in the law, and we would not allow infertile different sex couples to marry. But we do. No, marriage is about family, the glue of our society's moral fabric. In modern society, we don't have an underpopulation problem. We have a broken family problem. Sky-high divorce rates, parents who are never at home, single parents just getting by in impoverished households. Marriage needs help. Marriage holds families together and forms a loving environment for children to be raised. So why deny more loving couples from getting married? Isn't allowing our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters that opportunity the conservative and Christian thing to do? As the scientific consensus that homosexuality is not a choice proliferates throughout the broader society, more people will begin to empathize with the LGBT experience. I believe we as Christians will begin to realize that homosexuality is rooted in natural law, just as God's law is. I believe that if the writers of the biblical text had the knowledge we do today, homosexuality would not be viewed as something you can simply repent from. I know it is very difficult to think about what we believe in the church being fluid with culture. But the science tying homosexuality to natural law is very new, and the transition will take time. Just like when the astronomers challenged the traditional interpretations of 1 Chronicles 16:30 and Psalm 104:5, when abolitionists questioned the biblical support for slavery, when Martin Luther posited his 95 theses in defiance of the Roman Catholic Church, when liberal Christians began suggesting that interracial marriage was not a sin in God's eyes. In these and many other cases, social pressures were the catalyst for reforming the church's traditions. I know some will write me off as blasphemous or twisting God's word, but I'm trying to be consistent with biblical teaching and not haphazardly choosing which teachings to follow. I'm trying to adhere to Paul's grand theses of love and acceptance of all. I am compelled to open up this discussion, especially among the younger members of the church, because it is time we as Christians help form a more tolerant and accepting church right here in Hawaii in the true spirit of aloha. We are the body of Christ, to be sure, but we are an all too human body, and we're still growing into spiritual maturity. While I cannot vote to deny rights to a group of people that everyone else of us get to enjoy, I can only support a bill that ensures religious freedoms are protected. And this bill does. But hopefully one day, these religious freedoms to discriminate against the LGBT will no longer be practiced, that we as Christians will learn to be more accepting of a people who did not choose who they are. I am optimistic that within my lifetime, we will see this change within our mainstream churches here in Hawaii. I call out to all young Christians to make this happen. For these reasons, Chair, I vote aye.
Thank you very much. Next. Vice Chair Har, go ahead. Vice Chair Har, followed by Kobayashi. I'm recognizing Vice Chair Har, followed by Representative Kobayashi.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Madam Co-Chair, too. I want to thank both of you for your patience over these past 5 days. I think it really was a wonderful display of democracy at its finest. As all of us know who work at the legislature, to have the public become involved in an issue is something that belongs to all of you. I know that over the past 5 days, several people have lost their jobs because being here was more important to testify. And so I am so proud of the people of the state of Hawaii who came out to be a part of this process with us, to have your voices heard before your government. That being said, Mr. Chairman and Madam Co-Chair, I want to thank you for the amendments that you folks have put into this bill. I think that the public was heard in some certain instances, but I do continue to submit that this bill continues to have flaws. For example, Mr. Chairman, you just stated that this bill is based on the Connecticut exemption. However, if you read the actual language in the Connecticut law, it clearly states, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a religious organization, association, or society, or any nonprofit institution or organization operated, supervised, or controlled by, or in conjunction with a religious organization, association, or society shall not be required to provide services, accommodations, advantages, facilities, goods, or privileges to an individual if the request for such services, accommodations, advantages, facilities, goods, or privileges is related to the solemnization of a marriage or celebration of a marriage, and such solemnization or celebration is in violation of their religious beliefs and faith. Mr. Chairman, I would submit that the exemption in our current bill, our House Draft 1, is not the same. In addition, Mr. Chairman, we've talked a lot about public accommodations. The state of Washington, which is considered the third most atheist state, and considered one of the most liberal states, they recently had, in fact, legalized marijuana. They, too, in their same-sex marriage law, they have an express carve-out, and it states, a religious organization shall be immune from any claim or cause of action, including a claim pursuant to Chapter 49.60, which is the equivalent of 489 for us, HRS 489, based on its refusal to provide accommodations, facilities, advantages, privileges, services, or goods related to the solemnization or celebration of a marriage. My second point in this, Mr. Chairman, is this. You know, we've had thousands of people come and testify, and they talked about the process, and while you did take some exception to that, I must respectfully disagree, Mr. Chairman. The fact of the matter is this. With this particular measure right now, had we gone through a regular session, an HD1, a House Draft 1, would have come out of the Judiciary Committee. It subsequently, that HT1 would have then gone to the Finance Committee, where the public would have had a second opportunity to comment on these particular amendments. At this point in a special session, there is no more opportunity for the public to be involved, and that's where the process is flawed, Mr. Chairman. You know, we've had 57 hours of testimony. But again, this was done in an expedited short period of time. The process has been flawed, and the fact is there would have been additional hearings for the public to now comment on these amendments that are being made, and that opportunity has been taken away from the public. My third point, Mr. Chairman, is this. You know, this bill, ironically, is entitled Relating to Equal Rights. And yet, Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1, elevates one minority group over another minority group. The faith-based community is a minority group that is being discriminated against in Senate Bill 1 for the reasons I just discussed. In addition, Mr. Chairman, as you well know, this bill continues to give preferential treatment to same-sex couples in divorce, which is not equal. I want to thank the chairman for removing that Section 572 regarding parentage presumptions. But again, this bill is not equal, and yet it's entitled Relating to Equal Rights. Benefits for those who identify GLBT is not a zero-sum game. What is presented is the easiest solution, but is not necessarily the best solution. Finally, Mr. Chairman, freedom of religion cannot be protected without restrictions on the public accommodations law. Passing this bill without religious exemptions to our public accommodations law does, in fact, violate the First Amendment. Applying exemptions only to religious organizations prevents businesses, especially our small businesses, and individuals from expressing their religious and conscientious beliefs. The chilling effect from this would fundamentally change society and turn our Hawaii into arguably a totalitarian state. So I want to thank the chairman as well as the co-chair for the amendments they have put in. For these reasons, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I will be voting no.
Okay, Representative Kobayashi.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to note that throughout this very, very long committee hearing, we've had the largest participation of individuals ever, and with a remarkably large degree of decency, courtesy, and decorum. And I think both sides of the table should be acknowledged for that decency, courtesy, and decorum. As to the bill itself and reasons for or against, I would note this, that we have gone from solemnization to celebration of solemnization. This follows the Illinois law that was just passed today, and it follows the Connecticut law, which has been mentioned many times. Second thing is that the organizations that this law applies to has been broadened. We originally started with religious organizations. We are now going to nonprofit organizations operated, supervised, or controlled by a religious organization. Note that these nonprofit organizations could be for profit. So that is a large change, and it is also in keeping with the change that we see in the Connecticut law. Thirdly, I would note that we have gone from one immunization clause to 3 immunization clauses. So we are now protecting more people from fines, lawsuits, etc., than before. So while these amendments have perhaps not satisfied everyone, it should be noted that the exemption for individual conscience is still not being addressed. And as we had been told, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case regarding individual acts of conscience, and that it was found that should individuals be allowed to exempt themselves on the basis of individual conscience, that would be, quote, giving them a law unto themselves. And that, of course, raises some real questions. As to the other provisions, I think that it should be noted that so far as the Hawaiian parentage issue, it had been stated that many organizations here in Hawaii, including Kamehameha Schools and Department of Hawaiian Homelands, do not look at just your birth certificate. They actually look toward actual blood quantum, which is oftentimes spelled out in your birth certificate, but in the cases of adoption, not spelled out. So the same standards of blood quantum, so far as Hawaiians, for some of our biggest organizations, is not changed at all. You still have to prove actual biological blood quantum. Now, as to my position, I have a different district than some of these people here. I have an older district with older established churches. Most of these churches have not taken an official position, but we have had individual spokesmen and ministers from these churches speak. There is definitely a division in my district between those for and against. But if I count up everyone who contacted me, it is pretty clear that in my particular district, support for this bill is approximately 2-to-1 in favor. That is different from other districts. I should also note that several of the testifiers noted that there were at least 3 scientific polls this year, this calendar year, 2013, on this subject. 2 of them showed support for same-sex marriage in the range of the mid-50s and opposition in the range of the mid-30s. A 20% difference is a big difference. A third poll showed support virtually even at about 44%. Now, this kind of polling has been done nationwide as well as in states. It was reported in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser that we went from 35% support in 1999 to approximately 54% this year. Connecticut has the same situation. They have 24 polls over 20 years, and those show a break with less support pre-2009 and more support after 2009, and a majority in the recent years. So in terms of public opinion, I think that I'm fairly clear as to where my district is, and I think that there is a change both nationally as well in the state of Hawaii about public opinion. The last point is one made regarding whether being homosexual or gay is a choice or a lifestyle, as opposed to a genetic or biological trait. Now, please understand that science is not 100% sure. There's always a room for doubt. But it was pointed out that the homosexual phenotype has a relationship of 10,000 to 1. In other words, the linkages between those factors that are associated with homosexuality are heavily, heavily in favor of this not being a choice. Secondly, it was told to us that in terms of identical twin studies, the chances of a person being homosexual when another identical twin is homosexual has a tenfold factor. Tenfold factor. So that's a big difference. And I think that given these facts, I feel comfortable in voting yes for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Fukumoto, sorry. I always get you confused with my old colleague Fukunaga. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I just wanted to say, I do think we've had an unprecedented level of transparency and involvement in this process. But, sometimes when you let more light in, things just look uglier. And I think what I will say to people is, this is your system of government. This is how it's run. This is what happens. And to the young people that I think, will be disappointed and disheartened by some of the changes and some of the things that we do here today, I would just remind you, things only change if you demand change. So please stay involved. Don't just give up being involved. And just as for me and for my vote, I've heard loudly from my district who are largely in opposition. I'm sure people have noticed a lot of people from Mililani here. So for me and as their representative in this body, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lowen, followed by Johansson, followed by Carroll. Please.
Thank you. Thank you to the chairs so much for your hard work and endless patience, and to all the staff and committee members, and especially thank you to all those who came out to testify and took the time to get involved in the legislative process, and this is in this very difficult discussion. I do regret there's not equal opportunity for my neighbor island constituents to come and participate in person, but they have communicated with me a lot via emails and phone calls and social media. And I've heard from many, many of them on both sides of this issue. And I believe that, I listened to that and we worked on this bill, and with the amendments, this bill is balanced and provides for both equal rights for all and protects the First Amendment rights of religious organizations at the same time. And so with that, I will be voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is Representative Johansson, followed by Representative Woolley, I believe.
Thank you to both chairs.
Carroll, and then Woolley. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you to both chairs. And thank you to people on both sides of the issue, because I think we would have a fuller, more vibrant democracy if we had this kind of interchange of ideas and concern and passion for what is going on in government, irrespective of the issue. And I really appreciate all those who came out to testify, all those who submitted testimony, and all those who have sat through hours and days, and whether they've spoken or not, have been a part of that. I think that really, as much as it doesn't always look like what we think, I think that is really to be commended, and it's something that I respect from each and every one of you who are here, irrespective of whether we agree on the issue or not. I do think that there's been a most vibrant and very valid conversation about competing viewpoints, and I'm not sure that those viewpoints are ultimately reconcilable, and I think that's probably why we had 5 days of hearings and a history-making hearing that the chairs have allowed. I myself have spent many of these days trying to think about how we reconcile the desire for equal rights as defined in this bill with First Amendment rights as affirmed by our U.S. Constitution. And I think that's one of the most dissonant points that's come out through the 5 days of testimony, where I don't believe that we've been able to achieve agreement. Unfortunately, I don't feel like this bill reconciles that dissonance that is inherent in the bill. I appreciate very much the broadened exemptions, but I worry that it may not be enough. And I do think it's a legitimate concern that many have in the community out there with respect to this bill. I would prefer federal advocacy on this issue and the recognition of civil unions for extension of federal benefits. I certainly don't wish to see benefits denied to people, but I think we are acting a little prematurely because that may be an available option in the future. I do think that proponents of this measure have legitimately brought up the argument of whether or not rights should be subject to a majority vote. I also think there's an equally valid, and for me, an ultimately compelling argument that the essence of democracy does require operating by the consent of the governed. And while I'm not sure that any of us have been able to figure that out, I can't escape feeling that is something very powerful. I mean, considering what we've seen today, what I've heard from my community, and what I've read in testimony, it is that consent of the governed and the concerns and the questions of the governed that ultimately do not enable me to support this bill, and I will be voting respectfully in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carroll, followed by Woolley, followed by Takayama.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the chairs, Representative Rode and Representative Luke, for doing a fabulous job in trying to hear everybody here, especially what happened with the Senate and the disappointment that many people have expressed in that process. I also want to thank all the people who came to this building. Even when you weren't sure you were going to come, you came and you testified and you poured your heart out. I want to say thank you to everybody for sharing your thoughts, your concerns, your support, and even your disappointments. I want to say thank you. I also want to acknowledge the staff for their commitment and hard work in serving the public. They did a great job. And also want to say thank you to my members, for serving and their willingness to be on these committees. It's not an easy task, but yes, we've all made a commitment to do this. I also want to say thank you to Olelo for providing transparency in videotaping live and covering our legislative process so that the many people who couldn't be here, especially the neighbor islands who weren't afforded that opportunity to testify, was able to at least see the hearing. However, today I come with a very heavy heart, and this has been a very hard process for me because I do support benefits for our brothers and sisters in the LBGT community. However, I am sad because of the process. I'm sad because of all the many people who came here and felt betrayed by our government, that there was no transparency. And for me, it's always about the journey and how you reach there. And it's about the integrity of our process. And that's why I commend the chairs for doing the best that they could with what we were dealt with. But with that heavy heart, I just have a few comments that I would like to share with all of you. I'd like to thank the chairs for taking out the provision in regards to the parentage. There was many concerns regarding Native Hawaiians. And you know, we did check with our appropriate counsel that in this bill, did they really need it? And we were told it was okay to take it out. And later on, we can look at Chapter 584 and improve that to address the many concerns that came forward here. I'd also like to just say that, you know, for me, I represent islands. I am the Canoe District. I have 4 islands, with the exception of Kaho'olawe, because there's nobody there to testify. I have Molokai, Lanai, and East Maui. And a lot of times, when I go into my community, they always tell me, especially Molokai and Lanai, we are the forgotten people. And the other night, we had our aunties here from Molokai that shared with us their heart and their music. And you know, they came not only to testify, but to lift me up, because they knew that I had a hard task in this deliberation process. I've received many heartwarming letters and emails from my constituents and across the state, and I want to say thank you to all of those, whether they're for or against. Thank you for the wonderful things that you have said to me and the gratitude for all the work that I've been able to do. And I have to thank my colleagues too, because they're part of that process in affording me the chance to serve my community. But we've heard so many testifiers come before us. And you know, the way I was raised, you know, my tutu always told me, hard when somebody in the family is hurting and we're affording something else to somebody in that family. And you gotta kuka even more so. And we haven't given this issue that kuka time. We haven't looked at the unintended consequences that people may feel that could happen, like our education system. We haven't given the time just to absorb this issue. Yes, it may be talked about so many times over the years, but there are a lot of shock factors, and a lot of people came because they weren't sure what this meant. And my heart was just, every day when I sat here, and I did my best to be attentive. And I have to tell you, you know, I'm in remission with cancer and I take medication, so it was very hard to stay up all those times. But I came because I care. I care about all of you. And I kept thinking to myself, how can we look at this issue so we can have a win-win situation so that we can live with each other? Because what happened here was things I don't know if we can heal, but hopefully, to the grace of God and our higher source, we can forgive, we can love, and we can move forward. And I say that because already in families, they're fighting. You know, I've shared with all of you that I too, in my family, have people who are gay, and I love them tremendously. But when they come to me and say, Mele, you have to vote no. The process is not pono. The people are hurting, and you heard them up there. How can I support legislation to move forward if the community, and you've seen an abundance amount of community, are hurting? And for these reasons, I share with all of you that I have to vote no because of the process. I wish we could have taken it up during session. Why? Because it affords us the time, because there was so much concerns. And there was also an arrogance that I've experienced from the LBGT community, which I have always been supportive of, which broke my heart because I supported civil unions. I do support your issues. I got threatened. Shame on you for doing that. And I am a Democrat. But that's the ugly that came out of this process. Like anything, it's always easy when you're the champion or when things go well for you. And it's always hard when you're defeated. But it's even harder when you have to live with one another, especially when families are torn apart by an issue they may agree or may not agree. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I come to you with love and just hope that you understand that my no is not a no to you having benefits, but my no is because of the process. And I hope that in the future we can continue that discussion that we all brought forward today, because I also feel that not all has been lost. I feel that if we continue to talk about the things that we fear or the things that we're concerned with, we have 76 legislators here, we still have a session, we still have opportunity. And I'd like to also say, for the reasons that my colleagues who shared with you the concerns about the bill, I too have similar concerns. So without getting into the detail, I just want to say mahalo for being here, for being attentive, for participating in our process. And yes, this is your process, and we need your help to improve this process. And yes, we will continue to work on our transparency. But just remember, we're all not perfect. And we all have an agenda, but the most important thing, we live in Hawaii. And we have to learn to live with one another. So if we can move forward after this day, however it goes, just remember, we love each other. And that's the most important thing that will move us through this issue. So I want to say again, thank you to the chairs and my members, and thank you to all of you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Representative Woolley, followed by Takayama, followed by Onishi.
Thank you, Chair. And I know we need to actually get to session soon, and we'll be able to talk more about the issue. And I would like to take the time to talk about the legal issues. But I just want to take a moment here to thank everybody who came to testify. And I want to tell you that this has been so painful, and certainly the most painful thing I have had to go through and listen to, and to see a community divided. And so I have suffered. If there's any concern out there that I haven't suffered, I have definitely suffered. But I really want to also point out in particular my community and my Christian churches that have been opposed to this have been so kind to me and so gracious and always communicating with me about their concern and allowing me to take the time to explain my position about supporting equality. And I have had these very constituents come bring me Reese's cups and pumpkin bread and cupcakes. So I just thank you for your true Christian spirit, and that is really what speaks to me about our common values and our I think our focus on family. I think this hearing has been from both sides all about family. And there's nothing we hold more important, I think, than family. And there are different versions of what that means. And I believe wholeheartedly, and I have never wavered in my support for equality, equal treatment for all people, all couples. I don't see any reason my traditional marriage is affected in any way by somebody else's love for whoever they might be in love with, regardless of their sex. So I know that there are actual federal benefits that families are not getting today, and I am sorry for that, and I hope that soon that will be rectified, because every family needs help. That is the toughest challenge in my life, certainly, keeping a family together, keeping your children safe. And I think that we all agree that there's nothing more important. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time and remind us that we do have that common ground. There will be a need for ho'oponopono, and I thank the Hawaiians who have testified to remind us of that. There needs to be a healing. I think the process has been going on for a very long time, decades really, for some families. When I had to make the choice, I've actually been very clear in all my elections that I support equality. It's very fundamentally based on our Constitution, our federal Constitution and our state Constitution. So when I took an oath to serve, it required me, number one, to protect the First Amendment freedom for religion, and I think that this bill does that. It has a very nice, very broad exemption for churches so that no church and no clergy person will be penalized in any way for making their individual religious choice not to marry same-sex couples. It allows other churches to make the choice to do the opposite, and that's freedom as well. But most importantly, when I look at my Constitution, and I'll tell you, I carry this around a lot, and I do try to read it because it's not the easiest document to understand. But when you look at the 14th Amendment, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And that is why I feel obligated and very proud to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Representative Takayama, followed by Representative Onishi.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to echo the comments of many of my colleagues in expressing admiration for the many of you who've spent hours and days either in the this hearing room or outside in the hallway over the past several days. On one of our marathon hearing days last Friday, I marked the 31st anniversary of my wedding. And I say that to affirm my support for traditional marriage and assure you that I practice it as best I can. It struck me over the past 5 days that many of our testifiers spoke very passionately about personal rights and then came down diametrically opposite on their views on this issue before us. For me personally, I interpret the right to pursue happiness as giving gay couples the right to marry if they wish. And I feel confident that giving them this opportunity to do so will not weaken my marriage or any of yours in the years ahead. For those reasons, I'll be voting yes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Representative Onishi. Excuse me, I can't speak anymore. Representative Onishi, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, chairs, and thank you, fellow members, for participating in this, and especially thank you to the public, not only those of you that came out here, but for all of you that viewed us over Olelo and took the time and effort to watch and to listen. As Representative Lowen said, coming from the neighbor islands, it was very difficult for our members, our constituency, to participate here because of the costs, but they took the effort to let us all know what their positions were. They called, they sent email. This process has been something that has gone on over the last 5 months, from when the discussion after the session centered on whether or not a special session should be called. And again, we heard from both sides, yes and no to the special session. And once the governor called the special session, we heard again from the public in regards to the bill that the governor floated, whether to support it or not. So we have had thousands and thousands of contacts with the public in regards to this issue. And for those of you that thought that we weren't listening to you, that is furthest from the truth. I know all of these members here, and I know how seriously they take their jobs, and they did listen. Although, like Representative Tokioka said, we were looking at your testimony to see what you were saying in written form, because some of you didn't testify on your written testimony. You were testifying here in person, adding to your testimony. So we needed to look at what you had said. And some took it as us not paying attention. but that is furthest from the truth. And to me, as a freshman, this has been a tremendously open process. It's been unprecedented in my experience coming from the last session, where we had very significant issues that would have an hour or two of testimony in multiple hearings. And if we had only one event, well, I'm sorry, we had two events that had hearings in this hall, and those didn't even last a day. And so, I think that it's very important that the public participate, and we have heard you. For me, I also served in the military, serving our country, and it used to pain me to see my fellow brothers and sisters serving along with me that were gay, but were persecuted or chastised and had to hide how they really felt, because at that time in the military, if you were gay, they'd take you into the bathroom and they'd beat the hell out of you. That to me is unconscionable. And I really felt like, it's not something that people would do to each other just because they're different. And coming from Hawaii, I was very proud of having been raised with people from all kinds of different ethnic backgrounds, sharing our foods, sharing our culture. And going to the mainland, it was a huge awakening for me to see the division, to see the bigotry, to see how people treated each other without aloha. And for me, it's always been an issue of equality on this issue. And I worked for the last 20 years as a volunteer in the union, and our whole effort was trying to get equality for our members who work in government and at all levels of government. And to me, it's such a critical issue that everybody be treated equally and with respect. Yet, having said that, I also come with a religious background. I'm a devout Buddhist, and I feel like the protection for religious organizations needs to be paramount. And I believe that this bill protects not only religious organizations, but the people that work for religious organizations. And people may disagree, but the proof will be in the pudding, in what transpires from now on. And the good thing about this being a legislative issue is that if there are issues that come up, we have the ability to make corrections and to make adjustments. Okay, so that being said, I want to thank again everyone who participated, and I am voting yes on this issue. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? Representative, I'm so tired. Representative Derek Kawakami.
Thank you, chairs. Being a Catholic and supporting this bill could be viewed as unusual. I understand that. It's not an easy decision, but I grew up in a household where my mother was baptized, both Mormon and Catholic. I don't know what my dad is. I think he's Buddhist and Christian at times. I believe I even have some atheists in the family. But there was one resounding message that my parents always gave me. It doesn't matter your religion. It just matters that you believe in God and that there's no church better than the other. And sometimes in this role as legislators, we need to remove ourselves and be cognizant that there are many different beliefs. But the main thing is that we all know how to pray. And that was the biggest message that my mom gave me about religion, is that there is no bad religion as long as we believe in God, because it serves as a guiding light. And when you're lonely and sad and everybody else is gone, at least you have Jesus and God in your life, so you'll never be truly alone. I can remember days coming home from high school
and seeing Jehovah's Witnesses in my living room and almost being embarrassed because of the stigma that came with it. But my mom always welcomed them in. I remember coming home from college and not seeing anybody at home and going to Honduras I'm in and seeing my parents taking elders from the Mormon church out to dinner and totally forgetting about me. But the point was, they welcome all religions. And we may have our beliefs, but we have to be cognizant at times that there are some religions in the Christian church that believe that they should have the ability to be able to marry same-sex couples. And this bill has always been a bill about freedom for me, to protect the freedoms of churches from being persecuted and from facing lawsuits if they choose to practice their beliefs, and to protect the rights of everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, Vice Chair Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Cullen, go ahead.
It's going to be real quick. I just wanted to thank everyone that came here, watched Nolelo in regards to the process. I think everybody thanked them enough, but I had people come out from the district, and I just wanted to make sure I personally thanked them regarding the process and having everyone testify and wait around the Capitol. So, Chair.
Thank you very much. For the vote, Vice Chair Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the Judiciary Committee, voting on Senate Bill 1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes no. Representative Bellotti? Aye. Representative Brower? Aye. Representative Carroll? Representative Kaufman? Representative Ito? No. Representative Kawakami? Aye. Representative Lee? Aye. Representative Suji?
No.
Representative Woolley? Aye. Representative McDermott? Representative Thielen? Aye. Chair, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Colleagues.
Thank you. Finance members, same recommendation with amendments.
Okay, Finance Committee, Senate Bill 1, passing with amendments. Chair Luke?
Aye.
I vote aye. Vice Chair Johansson?
No.
Rep Cullen?
No.
Rep Hashem?
Aye.
Rep Ing?
Aye.
Rep Jordan?
No.
Rep Kobayashi?
Aye.
Rep Lowen?
Aye.
Rep Morikawa?
Aye.
Rep Onishi?
Aye.
Rep Takayama?
Aye.
Rep Tokioka?
No.
Rep Woodston?
No.
Rep Yamashita?
Aye.
Rep Fukumoto?
No.
Rep Ward? Thank you. Adopted.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're adjourned.